Well, good morning and welcome to today's event, Caribbean Competitiveness, Global Partnerships for Infrastructure Development. I'm Wazin Maula, Fellow and Lead of the Caribbean Initiative at the Atlantic Council, which is based in Washington, D.C., which also houses the only Caribbean program in the United States. I'm excited to be here in Jamaica for an important conversation on the role of international partners and the role that they can play to support infrastructure development here in Jamaica and also the wider Caribbean. Again, want to thank everyone for joining us here this morning. Today, we'll hear from Senator the Honorable Minister of Industry, Investment and Commerce, Aubyn Hill. Minister, thank you very much for joining us. I'm delighted to also have the EU's new ambassador to Jamaica joining us as well, who we'll hear from later also. And we have a few other distinguished speakers that I'll introduce as we get to the panel discussion shortly. But before that, again, want to thank everybody for joining us and invite Mission Director from USAID, Jaidev Singh, to the stage to kick off our programming with some opening comments before the keynote address from Minister Hill before we close with a public panel discussion. So again, thank you, and Jay, over to you.
Thanks, Wazim. I always wanted to start off with saying I'm happy I'm going before Minister Hill, because you never want to go after him. But thank you all for coming. This is such an important event. I want to recognize the Minister and the new EU Ambassador, Escola, and my colleagues here, Pat Francis, Oscar, and others who are here to talk about this really important event. And it's very timely, but building infrastructure in the Caribbean and also writ large in the small island development states. The U.S. government, and I represent the U.S. government in terms of our ambassador and myself, we're steadfast in our commitment to partner with Jamaica and the Caribbean region to build resilience in the face of growing threats and mitigate climate change. But that said, there's an opportunity here that we're all looking to uncover in terms of what can we do in terms of infrastructure to build more investment, to create more opportunities to link economies here in the United States as well as in Europe and elsewhere. I want us to start off by saying what we're doing in this is part of the White House's U.S. Caribbean Partnership to Address the Climate Crisis 2030, or PAC 2030 initiative. That's led by Vice President Harris. So we recognize that the Caribbean is on the front line of all this, and we want to provide ways to support them, but not just support them, but also grow our economies together in a partnership. Minister Hill knows that I've been working really hard with him on trying to create more opportunities. But I think one of the things I just want to highlight as we go forward on infrastructure, there's a huge opportunity in Jamaica on energy resilience, from solar to potentially nuclear, and then looking at a broad range of other options that are available to the island state to improve the investment climate. We've ourselves has been focusing on renewable energy, solar panels, solar energy, working with industry and the government of Jamaica on these issues. The point I want to make here, what I wanted to lead with, is there's liquidity in the market. The issue is not there's not funding per se. The private sector is key to all this. There is money. The issue becomes bankable projects. And as we have these discussions, we want to discuss what makes a bankable project. And because people want to see return on investment. People are gun shy. A lot of investors are gun shy. I talked to a lot of venture capitalists. They want to see what kind of ROI, return on investment, can they get. I think the Caribbean offers that, and this discussion will hopefully unlock some of those discussions in terms of what are these bankable projects that we can get behind and get our DFC and other banks to be involved in. The fact that we have banks like CAF here, I think, speaks volumes in terms of the interest in the Caribbean and developing these opportunities. So I don't want to talk too much longer. We are committed to supporting the government of Jamaica and our partners in the EU and others to look at partnerships in ways and collaboratively in terms of, because I think there's a marketplace here that we have to develop. And I think energy infrastructure is the new marketplace that we need to look at. And I think we have great partners in the government of Jamaica to do this. As you know, Minister Hill has been a great champion for a lot of the work we've been doing. And as I said, I prefer going before him because he's very eloquent and can speak circles around how I speak. But Minister Hill has been a big champion of improving investment and trade in Jamaica, and I love the fact that he calls himself the Minister of Business. So it's my great pleasure and honor to introduce Minister Hill, Honorable Senator Minister Hill, to the podium to talk about his vision and how we can structure our discussions and developing these bankable projects, but also partnering with government Jamaica to improve the economy, but also improve our ability to partner with Jamaica to improve our economy, because there's a marketplace here, and I think it's a give and take that we all benefit from. So thank you so much, Minister Hill.
Thank you very much, Jay. Great to be here this morning with you all. Pat, this is unusual. I generally don't veer to my left. But as I walked in, I veered to my left because the tycoon from Jamaica Producers was at the front. I met one of the other ones at the back. And I didn't look to the right, which is now I'm very happy that I'm looking to the right to see you there, Pat, your wonderful niece. We don't call her that this morning. She's an executive in her own right. Margaret, good to see you. And Oscar, who I met there. All you very distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Wazim Maula, nice to have you here. Fellow and lead of the Caribbean Initiative, Atlantic Council. We're always happy to have distinguished visitors with us here in Jamaica. So Wazim, welcome. Her Excellency Dr. Urja Askola, head of the European Union delegation to Jamaica. She's just new. She covers Belize and Bahamas for the European Union. Good to see you here, and so early after your arrival, you're very much involved. Mr. Oscar Valley. Oscar has become a very good friend of Jamaica. Oscar had the distinction of covering both El Salvador and Jamaica and watched El Salvador transition. I happen to have led one of my most recent business mission was in fact to Mexico, El Salvador, and to Colombia. Oscar and the Caribbean and the Latin American Caribbean Development Bank, which he represents in Jamaica now. His wife represents the World Bank. Oscar has been very, very helpful to us, very helpful to Jamaica, and looking to find ways to make sure we can use their money because, as you know, one of the things that has made us very good, a good country in the past 7 to 10 years is that we have been very careful not to borrow people's money. So there are lots of people who have been talking to us, and we're saying to them, yeah, we look at borrowing money if you can find ways to make sure those loans that you want to give us are denominated in Jamaican dollars. And Oscar's arrangement is well underway for that. Others who want to borrow, that's a way to go because that's the way we want to go. Mr. Singh, Jay, thank you so much, Director for Jamaica United States Agency for International Development. Jay and I talk quite often, most recently, I think this week or last week, on a number of issues and the way USAID has been helping us. Mr. Jeffrey Hall, who is right here, from the chairman of Kingston Wharfs. Jeff, good to see you. And there's a big LPPIA project that we have to get done. Jeffrey can tell you later on what LPPIA means, but generally it means large-scale pioneer projects investment authority, or act. That's the bill that we're looking at. We need, our mutual friend said it's going to get done. He said I should talk to Jeffrey, so I'm talking to Jeffrey publicly. No. Ms. Pat Francis, who I recognized earlier, non-resident senior fellow for the Atlantic Council. Ms. Fatma Aroro, infrastructure program leader for the Caribbean countries in the World Bank. Where is she? Ah, there she is. Wonderful. Good to see you. Technical experts and government partners, international partners, media practitioners. No media, nothing has ever happened. And therefore, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Grantley, I think I see you down there. Good to see you after a long time. And all the other distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed my pleasure to address this esteemed gathering as the Minister of Industry, Investment and Commerce, Jamaica's Business Ministry, as we come together to discuss a topic of vital importance to Jamaica and our region, and that's building global partnerships to support infrastructure development, enhance our competitiveness, and accelerate the Caribbean's connectivity to the world. Just on what Jay said, he knows that a couple of years ago, Minister Vaz, Mr. Williams, myself, Minister Samuda, here how many ministers? All of those. We went to the Arizona State University to look at renewable energy, and they're really advanced. And also we were looking at other IT issues. Part of what I came away with is that the USAID had and was doing at the time, a project in Puerto Rico to make sure they put solar energy on all the corporate buildings, I think, in the capital. So I said, why can't we have that in Jamaica? We have a global horizontal irradiance, which is how you measure solar energy, one of the highest in the world, much higher. We had it about 4 times what Germany did at the time, and Germany, until the Chinese came along, were the guys who were leading in solar power. And my estimation, apocryphal, not scientific, that probably Germany had 2 weeks of good sunshine in August. And they were leading the world in solar energy. And from all the way from Kingston all the way to Negril on the south coast, not to mention Clarendon, St. Catherine, and St. Elizabeth, we have the best sunshine all the time. So we need to make sure, certainly in the Kingston area and possibly on Antigua Bay, we get that solar on every roof and democratize energy, because when you own that energy, after 3-4 years, you've paid off for the solar thing. People who are maybe struggling otherwise then supply their own energy. So, Jay, I am never going to give up as long as USAID exists and I have a breath. Wonderful. Good to hear. Now, that's not in my speech. So now I'm going back to the speech. Today, we gather at an important juncture when the need for resilient, robust, and sustainable infrastructure in our countries is paramount. Our global competitiveness hinges on how effectively we build these pillars of growth. This effort requires more than local resources and expertise. We just don't have enough. It requires the collective power of partnership, global collaboration, and a shared vision for economic development across the region. It has to be a shared vision. Yes, of course we want to lead. We're Jamaicans. We lead everything. But we don't want to run away from everybody. And then everybody else will tell you that they're leading Jamaica anyway. Some of it is dreams. We accept that people must dream. And, well, you know what I mean. We need to get to a place, having fixed our economy, where we're leading even as we want to encourage all our Caribbean partners and Latin American partners to make sure we get ahead, because you can't get ahead just by yourself. You have to make sure you have partners with you. The heart of the regional development lies the strengthening of our logistics ecosystems. Get the speech. When you look at where Jamaica is located, 77.19 degrees west, and so on. You can go get the latitude. 19 or whatever it is, same latitude as Mumbai. We're at the mouth of the Panama Canal. We're an hour and 15 minutes from the largest market in the world. If, though, you were to use an F-35 from the largest economy in the world, you could probably do it, the round trip, in 20 minutes. We are linked by language to two of the, certainly the fastest growing economy in the Caribbean now, in the region actually, Guyana. Guyana has declared 11 billion barrels of oil. Exxon is leading the exploration, and you know they have things in their back pockets that they don't disclose. Suriname has declared 1 billion barrels of oil. Both countries have to be developed. They have ports that, because of the strength of their rivers, are silted all the time. The Berbice, the Marara, all the rest, the rivers that pour into Paramaribo, the port there just can't, you have 4 to 6 meters of draft. Oh, I see Mr. Riley here. So the moment I speak of draft, he comes up in my mind. So Newport West. So when you take a ship down there, you can't take it into the harbor. And the Chinese who were doing some things there and leave the ship out in way out at sea from Georgetown, they got a rude awakening because of the strength of the waves and stuff that go on, things that go on in seas. You guys know what you will educate me, but I know the ships couldn't stay there. So where are we looking at? Yes, I know Guyana pumping 800 or so barrels of oil now, maybe moving up to 1.2 million a day in the near future. You're going to have all the money to build a port like Antwerp or Dubai or Singapore in 5 to 7 years. But between here and 5 to 7 years, there's going to be a lot of money to be made. Where is the natural place? One of maybe the 7th best port in the world, well covered, well secured, Kingston Port. The logistics center that we're looking to build, we must become that. But we need investors like CAF, like Jeffrey's slew of companies, PB's slew of companies, to not just talk about, yes, we can invest overseas and you have to invest. And I'm the one encouraging you to invest overseas where you make a lot of money. I want that. But you have to look at saying, look, Jamaica is ours. How do we take advantage of that as here? You notice I'm calling names. I'm not shy. I don't blush easily. I'm not going to show you my hand, so I don't blush. I'm going to call names. So I'm saying to you, Jamaican investors, Caribbean investors must be leading it there. Yes, the EU can help us. Yes, Europeans can help us. But let me tell you something. To get the economic independence that we need, the Chinese are not going to do it for us. Our friends are not going to do it for us. We're going to have to do it. So I'm saying to you, as we look at infrastructure, and because shipping, the barges that are necessary to break bulk and ship from here to Guyana and Suriname and Trinidad and elsewhere, and to make sure that oil services, logistics centers that we want develop here in Jamaica can ship from here to Guyana and Louisiana and Texas, because some of the investors that will come from the Middle East would prefer to invest in Jamaica, where we have a legal system that takes us straight to the Privy Council. They are in London all the time. We have a currency that is not restricted. You bring in clean money, you take out clean money. You don't have to know the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance, or me, or even your bank manager. You have the money in the bank, no restrictions. We're one of the few countries in the region that can say that clearly, and it operates cleanly. We have lawyers. I'm now getting the bill for Jamaica International Financial Services. Minister Clark passed it in the House just before he left. I'm taking it to the Senate this weekend to make sure we have the arrangements for segregated accounts later on. We're going to have partnerships with LLC so that it's easy to get the financial services that you think you can get or you can get in Bermuda or BVI. Well, there are lots of Jamaican lawyers and accountants doing it there, bringing them back home with that legislation. We must become the logistics and financial services country in the region. And that's not going to happen because we want it or we think it. It's going to happen because my side do the legislation, set the playing field, and your side with the money come in and invest. And don't expect, or when the Germans come and invest or the Canadians come and invest, you say, oh, Andrew Honest and Aubyn Hill and Nigel, them give away everything to the foreigners. Well, what were you doing here? Remember when Michael Leachin came, take over the bank? The government had it. They advertised it ad nauseum for 5 years. Nobody bought it. But when Michael take it, and Michael did his vendors arrangement, that's his business. No, he didn't tie up anybody to sell him the bank. They say, oh, they give it away to a foreigner. So no bother with that nonsense. I'm telling you publicly now, I want to see Jamaicans investing in this, in the infrastructure. And luckily, the money is here. Jeffrey knows where to find it. He used to be the chairman of Scotiabank. He knows where to find the money. As we look at Jamaica's Logistics Hub Initiative, led by the Jamaica Special Economic Zone, it's one of the 20 agencies in my ministry. That zone is there to make sure we work with people and agency of the ministry, international partners such as the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, CAF, as I mentioned with Oscar, and the China LSE Corporation Fund have invested $550,000 in creating a logistics ecosystem that connects Jamaica. Thank you, Oscar. We talked about that at length. You went away and you found it and you came back, and I'm very happy to see that that is working. This includes infrastructure development at our ports, the advancement of warehousing solutions, and improved digital connectivity. All those are important. We need to have warehouses, really good warehouses. Now, I've noticed that Jamaican investors have invested significantly in the BPO sector. We couldn't get that off the ground unless Jamaican investors step up and do it. Congratulations, you've done it. Many people, I just opened one last week where Centerfield opened a place in Portmore for 900 seats. They opened another one in Montego Bay the day after that for another 900 seats. IBEX is moving its 2 offices from downtown and somewhere else, moved to Portmore, and this year will be adding 1,300 people. So that Jamaican investors have been able to do it. So make the next step up. We are looking at 580 acres of land right by the port of Kingston. We estimate that that will take about $220 to $250 million. In scheme of things, the pension funds here have money, investors have money. We need to look at putting consortia with people like CAF to get it done. So, and then as we do that, we're going to serve Guyana, we're going to serve Trinidad. This becomes a place that it can expand to elsewhere. And the connectivity, I am taking a mission to England this Saturday. I don't know, I have maybe 10, 12 companies. We've done this in 3 weeks. 6 of them, 5 of them are ICT companies. Last year, we took 16 ICT companies to Canada for a show. I didn't know we have so many in Jamaica. Some of those people who've been with me to Guyana and so on, and London before, are now, they've set up business offices in Dubai for ICT, Jamaican ICT being sold around the world. So we have people here who can do it. Yes, we have more. We need more, and we're going to get them as we grow. Jamaica intends to partner with Guyana to boost Guyana's food exports by leveraging Jamaica's agro-processing capabilities. When you go from St. Catherine to Negril there is not yet one cold storage that's there. I know one is going in. That's the farm belt. Why don't we have cold storage? And farmers don't have to do it. Investors can put in cold storage so the farmers have a place to farm. Then we need to look at make sure we're farming well by having mother farms looking after the smaller ones and providing capital and expertise for them, like Jamaica Brothers Group does, and I'm sure JP does with its farmers. Jamaica is one of the only 4 countries in the world to have an accreditation body that has 10 of the 11 scopes from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, under the third-party certification body program, a significant achievement made possible through JANAC Global Accreditation, an agency under the Ministry of Industry, Investment, and Commerce. Let me explain what that means. The FDA offers this participation with overseas companies. There are 4 non-FDA head office involved in this. 2 are in the United States, 1 in Asia, 1 in Jamaica. JANAC Global Accreditation is recognized by 3 international, including the FDA, accreditation bodies. When we accredit the labs to work with them, when an FDA accredited lab tests your products and you get to Louisiana or New York, you don't have to worry with the FDA. We've done it in Jamaica. A JANAC Global Accreditation operates in 11 countries in the Caribbean and going wider afield. JANAC has been so good that Coscu from CARICOM has just hired away our CEO. Sorry to see her go, happy to say yes, go and expand and reach further. So Jamaica is leading. No, you can't get ahead unless you have proper accreditation if you're dealing with food and medicine and so on. The hazardous HSRA, Services Regulatory Authority, that regulates nuclear energy in Jamaica. We have a nuclear plant here, for those of you who don't know. Yes, we have one. One of the only places outside the US and Canada and maybe Brazil, I don't know, that has one. And we serve the Caribbean from here. So the connectivity, again, is important. Global partnership is important, and JANAC is leading that way. But, you know, we also have other activities that we cooperate on and which we must do. The role of knowledge process outsourcing, by far, Jamaica is leading in that. You tend to know it as BPO. It's moving up the ladder as knowledge processing outsourcing, which is what we're looking at, and what Centerfield and so on. Centerfield, that the one I opened for, serves 50 Fortune 500 companies, many of them straight out of Jamaica. And they're very, very happy, which is why they're expanding. So the call to action is today, I call upon all our international partners, regional stakeholders, and the private sector to collaborate in a concerted effort to increase our productivity and the financial and technical resources. Why am I doing that? Because frankly, we have fixed an economy over the past 8 to 9 years. We inherited the fix from what is now the opposition party. I remember meeting the IMF every time they came down to deal with the then government, the PNP government. They'd meet the leader of the opposition then, Andrew Holness. I was the chairman of his Economic Advisory Council. Every single time, Dr. Steen, I think he's a Dutchman, would come. He was the first one from the IMF. Will you keep the agreement? Dr. Uma Ramakrishna came. Will you keep the agreement? I mean, before they say hello, that's what they say to us. Because we're in opposition. Ad nauseum, we said it. But we didn't just say it. The first meeting when Prime Minister Holness took his oath from the Governor General and went to the conference room in Jamaica House. I was there with him. Other people were there with him. And the IMF was the first meeting we had in 2016 as government. Will you keep the agreement? We didn't just keep it, we bust it up. In 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, all an economist would write about Jamaica is that we're a basket case. By 2018, 2019, the tune had changed. We had become the poster child for the IMF. It's not an accolade I want Jamaica to ever have again, because it means we would have been a basket case to become a poster child. Somebody else can have it. We must now stay on track. And how do we stay on track? Those fiscal arrangements have been outstanding. And right now, compliment to my colleague, Dr. Nigel Clark, who today is his first day as the Deputy Managing Director of the IMF. He starts working today. Done a great job, led it clearly under the leadership of a very smart Prime Minister, Andrew Holness. I work with him, I can tell you he's smart. I may not have to tell you that. I not run for nothing. I just saw it stay. Smart. So we've done well there. But you know something? All of you here in business, you keep cutting your costs. You keep reducing your debt to GDP. And yes, we get it down to 56 in 3 or 4 years. But unless you can cut your expenses as much as you want, you're running a business. You can cut high-lows expenses as much as you want. If you're not making revenues, you're not going to have a business after a while. So Jamaica must grow. The reason why I'm here this morning and saying we must collaborate on this infrastructure arrangement across the board is that we must know the next dispensation, Jamaica must grow. We must be able to provide better health services, better education, better roads, better everything, so that we move our per capita GDP from less than 7,000 to well past Barbados 25, Barbados 22, Trinidad 25, Bahamas is at 34, and God help us, Cayman, Bermuda is at 122. We will never become rich selling to less than 3 million people with a per capita GDP of less than 7,000. It cannot happen. So we must build new things here, build a good infrastructure, new products, and new services. We're never going to challenge China, the United States, or even Israel and Canada as a manufacturing country. But boy, we can take them on in services. Yes, we will manufacture some things. And we must continue. Separate is doing a great job. Want to see more of that. But we have to make sure we understand we grow our services, because we can train people to do that. And we therefore must grow the economy in the next dispensation to make sure we are the country we want to be. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, every day we must strive to become known regionally and internationally as focused, performing, productive, and very smart innovators and crafters of ingenious services and products that business people will want to buy. All stakeholders and international partners here today must join in this noble regional, national effort to cement our political independence. We're in our 7th decade of political independence. But in order to cement that political independence, that it lasts, we must make sure we develop economic independence. And Jay, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm happy that so many partners are willing to do that. And when we start to do that, I must tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that is only the start, because that per capita GDP must continue to go past 10. That's about where DOMREP is right now, and then begin to move well past the others, because the Chinese are not going to do it for us. The Americans are not going to do it for us. Our friends in Trinidad is not going to do it for us. It's we Jamaicans who will have to do it. And ladies and gentlemen, that's just the start. Thank you, Jay.
You know, we had a plan of action today on what we were going to talk about, but your comments, you know, which were very much related to the conversation I had with Jeffrey yesterday about the opportunity for Jamaica and the wider Caribbean, I think we'll shift our conversation a little bit more. We'll talk a little bit less about the challenges and more about the opportunity. So thank you very much for your comments. Thank you, Jay, for your opening comments as well. I'd like to invite a distinguished group of speakers to the stage: Ambassador Escola, Patricia Francis, Jeffrey Hall, Oscar Valle, and Fatima Arroyo. Please feel free to join me on stage. Really keep it that you'll be yes.
Minister?
Yeah. Well, thank you again for all of you for joining us. You know, directly to my left, we have Dr. Urja Escola, the EU's newest ambassador to Jamaica, Belize, and the Bahamas. Ambassador Escola has a track record already working with the Caribbean, having been a co-chair of CARIFORM EU Trade Committee, has worked with a number of small island developing states in the Pacific. So very happy to have Ambassador Escola now here with us in the Caribbean. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Next, we have Patricia Francis, who's a director at Portland Private Equity and White Shore Partners. For us, also a non-resident senior fellow with the Atlantic Council. Patricia's been working with us for a number of years. Has been, worked with us in our U.S. Caribbean Consultative Group, was instrumental in the development of our Caribbean Climate Response Task Force, and has been instrumental in our work on gender equality and equity that we have in our partnership with UN Women's Impact. Thank you very much for being here with us as well. Next, we're also joined by Jeffrey Hall, who's chairman of Kingston Ward and CEO of Jamaica Producers Group. Jeffrey is one of Jamaica's leading business leaders and leading thought leaders as well. Just in a conversation yesterday, completely changed our thinking on how we wanted to work with Jamaica and the wider Caribbean, not just on infrastructure, but a number of different issues as well. So really excited for your experience and insights you're going to share with us today. We also have Oscar Valle with us as well from CAF, who's already been introduced for some of the great work he's done here in Jamaica. And CAF is a great partner of the Atlantic Council. We have some upcoming work in El Salvador, but we're kicking it off here in Jamaica first. Oscar's had senior roles at the World Bank and has taught in universities across the Americas. So thank you for joining us. And last but not least, Fatima Arroyo, the infrastructure program lead for Caribbean countries at the World Bank. A wide ranging of experience, not just here in Jamaica and the Caribbean, but the rest of the world, working in Latin America, working in Africa. So both Fatima and Oscar kind of bring that global and regional perspective as we also drill down on some Jamaica relevant issues. So today's conversation, as I mentioned, we'll talk a lot about the opportunities not just for Jamaica, but for global partners to participate in Jamaica and the wider Caribbean development, specifically when it comes to infrastructure development. But before we get to that, I think we need to get sort of a lay of the land of what's needed here in Jamaica. We heard a lot of that from Minister Hill, but I would like to kind of go down the line, starting with you, Ambassador, on, I guess maybe in your short time here already, specifically thinking about the climate, the energy space, maybe even others, what are some of the infrastructure needs that you see in Jamaica? But obviously, you have a regional portfolio as well that you may see across the region, and then go on the line.
Thank you very much. Indeed, it's very intimidating to take the floor after Minister Hill. I had already heard about that, but I will try. Yes, indeed, infrastructure is an important part of the work that we are doing with the government of Jamaica, with the Jamaican interlocutors at the moment, and in the broader region as well. As Honorable Minister mentioned, the port of Kingston, that is at our radar, and we are working on partnering with the Shipping Association of Jamaica to set up a plan to green, modernize, and improve that infrastructure to indeed enable it to become a leader in shipping industry in this region, and why not globally? But we need to indeed advance in stages to make sure that it is feasible, that it does not lead to environmental damage and all these kind of things. So we are at this stage now on setting out these kind of plans and starting with infrastructure enhancements. And at regional level, we are working on regional connectivity, port infrastructures as well. And I think in the competitiveness, and when we look at the competitiveness of ports, for instance, I think one of the best ways to go is to go green. To go green, because that is there will be, I would say, with the carbon taxes going up, with the global regulations tightening up, and shipping industry moving increasingly towards green fueling and green transport systems. I think those ports that will have the ability to supply green shipping industry will at the end emerge as winners.
Thank you, Ambassador. And the one point you mentioned there about competitiveness, it speaks to a lot of what Minister Hill was mentioning on, not just being to be a significant player in the world. Industry in Jamaica and the rest of the Caribbean needs to be competitive. Speaks to a lot of what Jay was talking about part of that is building bankable projects. And it's good to see that the EU is already really active in this space. Jeffrey, I want to go to you. You have obviously the industry perspective, very much a business leader here. I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on, maybe some of the infrastructure projects you're already working on, but what else is needed? What else is needed here in Jamaica?
Thank you, Wazim. I don't think there's an area of infrastructure that does not represent an opportunity for Jamaica, i.e., we need water, we need energy, we need ports, we need transport, we need telecoms. I think a question for this group is, what do we need to do to get it, to fulfill the vision that Minister Aubyn Hill laid out and the opportunity set that we see for ourselves? What's missing? And I think what's missing right now is the underlying ecosystem for attracting long-term investment. It's an opportunity I think we can fulfill, but just to be clear, the nature of an infrastructure deal is such that it involves large capital. And a significant airport or a significant port can be something that would exist in a large economy. And in a large economy, you'll have the ecosystem present, the law firms, the accounting firms, the government systems, etc. And in a relatively small economy, these skills need to develop. And so what we've observed is that you have global players who are willing to construct. So when you look at an infrastructure deal, you're going to have what you might call development risk, the ability to make this thing happen, to carve a highway out of a mountain. For the most part, the things that we need to do, there are people in the world that can do that. And then you have what I would call kind of traffic risk, a set of infrastructure projects that people are actually going to use in the volume sufficient to pay for them. And I would say that we can find and we should identify those that people can pay. And then you have kind of credit risk, making sure that the underlying party involved is going to get you the money. And in order to cover off all of those risks, you have to prepare a set of legal agreements and financial models that would, be this high if there were agreements and this wide if there are financial models. And so you need firms of excellence that can handle this. The government is a particularly important counterparty to these important deals. And I think there's an opportunity for the skill sets required of government to be co-located to a greater extent in a single entity. Right now, to do a large-scale project, you're going to the Attorney General's chambers for legal advice and the position of the government. You're going to the Ministry of Finance for some kind of underlying position. You're going independently to tax. You're going to the DBJ for their core privileges and expertise. I think we need to enhance these skills and co-locate them to a greater extent. These are complex projects. By way of example, and Simone Pearson is here, she's General Counsel of the Pan Jamaica Group. We are, as we speak, doing a $100 million water treatment facility as a partnership with EPLI. PBL, shout out to you as well as chairman of EPLI. And that project requires J dollar financing because the underlying payers for the water will ultimately be Jamaican dollars. But we have to attract money from overseas, from development institutions. So we then have to get ourselves into swaps, the currency swaps. We have to insulate it from the government of Jamaica risk, because Aubyn doesn't want it on his balance sheet. He wants it off the balance sheet of the government of Jamaica. They want to see private enterprise take the risk. And so when you put all of this together with EPC contracts, which are construction contracts, with operating contracts, it's a complex animal. And the ecosystem for doing it is where I see an opportunity to partner with stakeholders.
Thank you, Jeffrey. An underlying ecosystem that needs to be developed. I think we'd love to kind of get your insights on, at a later time in this panel is what that looks like, and what the role of international partners, government of course, but international partners can play there. But Pat, want to go to you and kind of get your thoughts on maybe a reaction to some of the comments that have already been made, but also to use Jeffrey's words, where do the opportunities lie, especially in the infrastructure space?
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Minister Hill, if I put on Minister Hill's hat that I have with him, which is chairperson of the Trade Facilitation Task Force, the issue that you speak about, which is the ecosystem that will allow trade to move or even to make an infrastructure project happen, is something that I think the government has to look at from a different perspective, because as Jeffrey says, everything is running in parallel systems. And ministers, while they speak to each other, the technical teams that run the ministries are all operating totally independently. And what you actually need them to do is to work together. So this is like trying to push an elephant up a hill. And it's a really difficult thing, despite the fact that you may have somebody like Minister Hill with the vision. It is to bring everyone else along. And that may be fine in his ministry, but he has to have an impact on all these other ministries that have other issues that they think are critical and important. So, I'm lucky to have been in a position where I've been in private sector, government, international organizations, and so I have seen the perspective from all different angles. And it's easy when you go to a country like Malaysia, which says, or Singapore, that says, we're going to do this. And that means that everybody has to get on board. Here, it's very different, and everybody has their own initiatives that they're working on. So I think that this is, the next step for the government, and I keep saying that we have a methodology. We had the EPOC methodology, which brought the public, private sector, and civil society together with one mission, which Minister Hill spoke about, and mission accomplished. I believe that we need something similar to look at the next step of our economic development, which is that we have to have the underlying infrastructure if we're going to be competitive. That infrastructure, I mean, we're talking about whether it is we're talking about the port, we're talking about water, sewerage, whatever it is that we need, because we need everything. But we need that focus of bringing together the different elements that are necessary to move this forward with one mission of getting this going. Because, you know, we have history here of projects that we have undertaken. We should learn from the story of the past. What mistakes we've made, we should learn from that. And I think, you know, if we look at public-private partnerships, if we look at the investment that we've had in the past, we can see where the weaknesses were. We can look at, I remember being part of the whole JPSCO divestment. I remember being, or at least a witness to the cable and wireless, and that, well, at least I was part of the breaking up of cable and wireless. So, you know, the history that we have, we should learn from that. We need to focus on bringing together an equivalent of EPOC to move the economy forward now. And not, no disrespect to the development, the task force that you used to lead in the OPM, Minister. I think we need to make it smaller. We need to make it smaller and have less of a broad stroke. But it has to have the power, like EPOC had, and the equivalent to move things forward. Because I don't see how we're going to get all of these things done and focus unless we can all come together. Because let's face it, today we have, thanks to the EU, we have with us a group from Uruguay who are working on part of what the port needs to do in order to make it competitive going forward. We have a huge drainage project, drainage problem. Unless we solve that drainage problem, we are not going to have a port which is going to be something which will be world class. But we're going to have to finance that drainage project. So today we are, with the thanks from the European Union, we're going to be able to put a feasibility study, we're going to be able to design the project, but we have to finance it. How are we going to finance it? We're going to need a public-private partnership. We're going to need a mechanism to finance that. We want to see the transformation of Newport West. That transformation of Newport West, again, how are we going to finance that? What is it going to be? Is it going to be an SEZ? Is it going to be, you know, how is all of the players going to come together to finance that? So the huge opportunities that Minister speaks about, very important that that we move as a private sector to deliver on those. But I think there has to be coming together of the mind of how to bring all the elements together to make it happen in a time frame which is reasonable. You know, we could talk about for the next 10 years we could be working to try and bring these things together. But unless we orchestrate something, we will not achieve all the things that we have a dream about achieving.
Thank you, Pat. So what I'm taking from both your comments and Jeffrey's comments is that we need an underlying ecosystem that helps propel a single mission in the same direction.
Yeah.
That's what we need, and there are complex arrangements. It can be a challenge, but is doable at the same time. But all of which will need financial assistance, will need technical assistance, which is why I feel like you queued up Fatima and Oscar very well to kind of tackle that. So Fatima will go to you, and then ask her to kind of think about, what are some of the technical assistance, financial assistance that can be available to help Jamaica and even other Caribbean countries as well that can learn from this experience to move this forward.
Thanks, and thanks again for the invitation to be here in this discussion. Maybe in terms of this discussion, I wanted to bring the discussion on infrastructure in the Caribbean also within a global, what a colleague of mine at the World Bank calls mega trends, that we are seeing globally. One, it is the energy transition that we are seeing globally, and I think it is important to think about what does it mean for the Caribbean, this energy transition. Because in a way, in any transitions, there are going to be winners and losers. But what are really these energy transitions, the benefits for the Caribbean, and having into account islands that are highly dependent on fuel for energy, with high cost of electricity for business and individuals. Really, this energy transition represents a huge opportunity. So overall, in the Caribbean, this is an agenda on energy transition that at the World Bank, we consider a priority because this is something we hear from countries. In other regions in the world, for example, we focus more in energy access. In Africa now we have a big program we call Mission 300 that is focusing on energy access, but in the Caribbean actually, except Haiti, the most focus on most opportunities where we see in the infrastructure is actually in energy sectors in this energy transition. So this is one big trend that we are seeing, and where we are working. We are 2 regional operations, and this is another point I wanted to make. Also thinking regionally in the Caribbean, which is something that we have been trying for a while to promote. It has not been that easy. The other dimension that I think, the other mega trend that we are seeing, it is the digitalization. No? And this digitalization, at the end, it is a very cross-cutting dimension that, for example, in ports is extremely important. And Jamaica is an example globally in the port digitalization. And I think we need to recognize also these great achievements of Jamaica in the development of their port community system and overall digitalization of the port. So this is another agenda of digitalization that I think is particularly important in the region. No? So on infrastructure, I think these are 2 particular dimensions that I think linked to these mega trends that are important. A third dimension is more linked to the logistics and competitiveness from the point of view of logistics of the region. Again, here we should be thinking it in a context where we see also trends in the global maritime industry, where we are seeing larger and larger linear ships, and where we need an approach in the Caribbean that brings together transshipment hubs with a much more last mile distribution. And that needs really, again, a regional vision. That's something that individually cannot be achieved. The transshipment hubs in the Caribbean are already well defined. Are Kingston, are Trinidad, are to a certain extent Barbados, I guess, but to less extent. So I think the transshipment hubs within the region are more or less defined. But I think there is also a need there to think and to think collectively as a region on how you can also link that with smaller economies and get competitiveness at a regional level. So again, I think opportunities there is an agenda that I believe needs to be thought regionally and coming really from the countries on the definition on this agenda. In terms of the specific questions on how the World Bank and particularly support countries in the region, so indeed there is a strong agenda on technical assistance in. And an agenda on investment. Currently our energy agenda is focusing a lot on two dimensions. One, it is facilitating or promoting the development of renewable energy, and with two, I would say three main dimensions. One dimension, it is providing the technical assistance to prepare good projects with transaction advisory to really prepare quality projects, and to define also a pipeline of projects, because at the end, to bring quality private sector to the region, if you think about having, a company might come, but there's not only this individual opportunity, but there is other down the line where, of interesting projects that it's really important for the private sector. So this is one dimension. A second dimension, it is to define the risking instruments that can help to attract private sector. Because at the end, in the generation part of energy, there are tremendous opportunities to mobilize private sector financing. So this is another window we are supporting through the financing of the risking instruments. And another important dimension, it is to build resilience of the system, especially in the transmission distribution dimensions of energy. So this is another package of investment that we are supporting. So this is just to give an example, one package of solutions that we are providing to our clients. We are in the process of preparing a regional operations that initially include 3 countries in the Caribbean, but with a lot of potential really to scale up and include more countries going forward. I'll stop here, thanks.
Thank you, Fatima, and a great overview of the region. I think specifically your points on de-risking instruments, technical assistance, making it easier for private sector to move forward projects in the pipeline, I think speaks to Jay's earlier point on bankable projects. And it's something at the Atlantic Council that we work a lot on, is moving projects through the pipeline, but specifically that pre-project phase, which can be specifically difficult for private sector. Oscar, want to go to get some of your insights as well. We've heard already from Minister Hill of the success that CAF has had, and maybe, if you want to react to some of the comments that have already been made, but also, so what are the lessons learned there that can be applied to future projects?
First, Minister Hill is a very, very good friend. So I'm going to start blushing each time he speaks, because I think that the important thing is that we all work together to achieve the objective that he is putting on the table. But let me tell you a story first. My first experience when I started working in development was actually to work on a renewable energy project in my own country, Argentina. So I was sent as a young, many years ago, don't ask me how many, many years ago I was sent there to develop a renewable energy project, solar panels in Argentina, my country. I can come back home and say, listen, I have the solutions. I got to the highlands of Argentina, 4,000 meters. It was cold, but it was sunny. I said, this is it. I can bring the solar panels here. Everybody's going to feel that I'm Maradona, Messi. I got there and I said, look, I have the solution for your energy problem, solar panels. And they said, yeah, but we don't want this. I said, why not? I said, because we need power tools. And at that point, the technology wasn't there yet. They said, but listen, I can get you power tools that actually work with 12 volts. They said, yeah, and what are we going to do if they break down? I learned something. And I think that that's an important point when you work in development about exactly the question that you put on the table. First thing is to listen, and second, to understand. And based on that listening, when I met for the first time with Minister Hill, it was very clear to me that if we wanted to work in Jamaica, we had to understand first the ecosystem in which we're going to be working, the context in which we're working. And the main issue here is Jamaica did an incredible job in reducing its debt to GDP ratio. If I, as a development institution, want to really support that effort, I have to be creative and not burden Jamaica's with additional debt. So I have to think outside the box. Of course, technical assistance is critical because that allows us to think outside the box. The issue is then, how do we provide the Caribbean with the $19 billion of investment that they need to cover the infrastructure gap? How do we do this? And I think in the particular case of Jamaica, we have to look at the financial system of Jamaica. The financial system of Jamaica, in particular the pension funds, the insurance companies, are very liquid. And they're very, very good shape. The challenge here is how do we bring together the demand for good projects with the supply of good projects? And how do we establish a system in which we can actually channel the liquidity that we have in Jamaican dollars towards these projects without increasing the public debt exposure and without jeopardizing the amazing effort that the people of Jamaica have done to actually reduce their debt to GDP ratio. And I don't care about the poster child of the IMF or not. I do care that you achieved something that not many countries have achieved in the history, which is becoming a poster child of fiscal stability with the public support for that fiscal stability. So the issue is here, how do we bring these two things together? And I think that as a development community, we have to work together, and I'm happy that, for example, I see Jerry here, because he has the experience also of working in this country. How do we can actually bring these two things together? On one side, the liquidity in Jamaican dollars, and on the other side, the supply of projects. PPP is one option. But then how do we actually ensure that there's funding, and what are the instruments? And I think as an international community, that's where we can actually make a difference. Generate that technical assistance to create the instruments so that we can actually channel those funds that are in the community towards good infrastructure projects. The ports, the Jamaican Special Economic Zone, Kaimana, energy projects, waste to energy, the whole issue about the landfills, just to mention some of them. Education, one thing that USAID has been working very, very, very hard in trying to improve the education system by improving also the infrastructure. So I think that to respond to your question and linking it to the example, let's listen, understand, and based on that understanding, let's develop the instruments so that we can channel the existing resources, the existing talent to achieve and to allow the success for what Minister Hill just proposed.
Thank you, Oscar. And I want to pick up on one thing there and go to Patricia and Jeffrey to get the perspective, is that PPP framework that can be a solution. You know, Patricia, what does that look like? What goes into building that framework that can match that supply and demand that Oscar was talking about? And Jeffrey, I know you have experience already in this, and maybe if you can provide some of those examples. And then we'll go to you, Ambassador, on what can be the international role there, especially for the EU, but also, in your opinion, other like-minded partners that are here working in Jamaica as well. So, Pat, we'll go to you, and then Jeffrey.
Thank you very much. I think one of the big challenges that we face there is the mismatch of our current policies with the opportunities. So, for example, we know we have to green our port. This is an objective that we have. But in order to have zero emission policy there, we have to deliver zero emission energy to the port. But what the current policy mix that exists with our JPSCO would mean that each terminal would have to have 100% ownership of the investment to deliver, which is, you know, obviously a no game at this point in time. That would make no economic sense whatsoever. So how are we going to deliver zero emission energy to the port, which we have to, as something in the future? So I think, you know, when you say we look at the problematic, we know where the resources can come from, how are we going to bring the policy mix? And this is where I was saying that we have to get everybody on the same page as to what the objectives are, so that we can see in the future not just what we need today. Because when we set up that JPSCO thing, you know, years ago, what was the issue? The issue was that we were having constant electricity loss. You know, everybody, how many hours a day, how many hours a week and we were so happy to bring somebody in to make an investment to actually allow us to have energy every day. That was our dream. Now we have a different set of dreams. And in thinking about what the dream is, we can't think about what we need today. We have to think about what are we going to need 15, 20 years down the road, and what is that policy that we have to have in order to deliver on that. And that's where we need to spend the time and energy now, very, very critically, to, well, serendipitously, look who's walking in the door. You know, I think that I think that it's importantly that the kind of thinking that needs to go in place now needs to also bring everybody on board in terms of the policy mix that we're going to need to deliver for the future. And so that's just the beginning, because if we think about the infrastructure needs, whether it's health, whether it's, you know, some of these are easier than others, but when you have to look at the return on investment and you have to deliver to the private sector, what are those policy initiatives that you have to put in place in order to make sure that private sector is going to be willing to put their money in, that everybody understands what their role and function is, and you know, in beginning this work on the port that we're looking at and the drainage project that we're looking at, we have to overcome the previous culture that we had about maintenance. How do we build that into the thinking also? Because if we don't build maintenance into our thinking, 5 years from now, if we build something, it'll deteriorate and we have to build again, which is kind of the mentality that we currently have. So there are a number of things that have to happen: a change in the policy mix, the urgency of the government to sit down with the private sector to come up with and I'll tell a little story, because I recall the telecommunications. I mean, we were at a point where we were trying to develop the back office operations. And Jamaica was totally uncompetitive with, you know, how much we were charging for a TEU line compared to Dominican Republic. And, you know, sitting down with the chairman of Cape, he would say to me, listen, you know, we're not changing anything. We're not changing anything. We have a contract for the next 25 years and then another 25 years after that. And so it took a totally different view, which we were only able to achieve not with the investors here, but with the Home Office in London, going there and saying, look, Jamaica has to change. So JPSCO is in a particular situation. I think we're in that situation now. The world has changed around us. We're going to have to find a way to change JPSCO in order to make us be able to live for the future. And that's just the same problem that we had with telecommunications at that time. So it's policy mix, it's bringing the various pieces of the table to the table in order to overcome the hurdles that we have right now.
Thank you, Pat. And that point about policies that will allow the private sector to put their money in, I would imagine that those same policies will make it much more comfortable for international investors also to participate in that conversation too and put their money in. So Jeffrey, I want to get some of your reaction there because you've been working in the space for quite some time. You understand what the ecosystem, like you said before, what that underlying ecosystem needs to look like in order to actually put in that equity investment in order to put the money in as well. So I'd love to get some of your reaction before we go to the ambassador.
I'll try to be quick. I think the comments that Fatima put out there in terms of identifying megatrends and areas of importance is a starting point. It's very constructive. And I think the universal set of things that we should be talking about as infrastructure should include the hard stuff. For the purpose of this discussion, I don't consider building warehouses, for example, as important as that may be, to necessarily fall squarely within the bucket of the big problem that that Oscar laid out. So I agree with the framing that you have these stakeholders, most notably the government of Jamaica and the global infrastructure players who are going to be necessary to do your shortlist, Fatima, of infrastructure projects, meaning there aren't infrastructure companies or construction companies that can do digital transformation at the scale that's necessary, or energy transformation at the scale that's necessary, or transport at the scale that's necessary. So those folks, these global infrastructure players, many of whom are private enterprises, don't actually want to carry forever and ever at the consolidated level on their balance sheet the debt necessary to do the infrastructure. They just want to build the airport and get out, build a port and get out. The government has woken up and said, we don't want to have this on our balance sheet and we don't want to run this thing. And so that leaves owners of capital to some extent and people who are willing to pay for use. But those people vary in their level of sophistication. And the government is fairly sophisticated but has its own set of agendas, as do the infrastructure players. What we find are a couple of things, Wazim. Thing number one is that it's important for the four groups to, and I'll try to be quick about it, to benefit from a local owner of capital at the table. A local owner of capital that can assess parts of the risk and is willing to put some skin in the game to represent their understanding of that risk. And that's the role that we play and are playing, whether it be in the port business or in the water business, etc. So we are willing to work with the Vincis of this world, but also to put our capital on the ground and put our understanding of risk and government and user on the ground as well. Now, what's happened in Jamaica is two things. Thing number one is, to your point, Oscar, the local passive owners of capital find this whole thing very complex. And to Pat Francis' point, the regulatory environment isn't always conducive to them participating. And it's important to note that the startup costs of associating the big infrastructure project, even if you don't get it, can be quite meaningful and can represent an expense. So what we see is an opportunity to de-risk the whole thing, to get more participants involved by making all the participants more aware of what we're doing. And that involves the government concentrating on the part of infrastructure that is complex and putting in a single space the various elements. It involves us making sure that the government adheres to a level of transparency when it's doing projects, because otherwise it will not attract the kind of capitalists necessary to do these deals. And I don't just mean in respect of corruption, I mean in respect of program decision making. Because if you tell me you're going to tender an airport opportunity, and I spend millions of dollars to have engineers assess it, and lawyers and financial people to build models, and then you say, I've changed my mind, I'm going to sole source it with a friend of mine from wherever, even if that person is the right person, it means I'll not bother to come back to Jamaica. And so that's important. The final thing that I will say is it's important for the government to, at the end of the day, to deselect the things that are not complex, but also to figure out a way to get out of stuff when it's done its work. And I think Jamaica is proving to be reasonably capable there. So it's just recently monetized a PPP that was successful at the airport. It's taken the money back and gotten and moved on. And maybe they can redeploy that elsewhere. And the same would be true for Wigton, which is the wind energy. The same would be true for the highway systems. And so the government needs to be comfortable getting it done and releasing it and monetizing it. And I think that's a gap that we're seeing in other Caribbean jurisdictions. So those are some of the things that I think would be opportunities for us, I think, to work together looking forward.
Thank you, Jeffrey. A really good point on, it speaks to Pat's point of, about making private sector feel comfortable to put money in. And I think the point you hit on the head was, and others as well, is we need to de-risk this whole ecosystem, right? Not just for local private sector, but also for international investors and governments to work in the region. So as we begin to come up on time, and I know we're running out of time a little bit, we'd love to hear from you, Ambassador, on talked a lot about the regulatory framework, we've talked a lot about PPPs and what needs to happen here in Jamaica. What do you think can be the role of the EU and just any international partner of Jamaica and the wider Caribbean? And then Oscar and Fatima will end with you on your perspective on the same question. Ambassador.
I was talking about the global gateway and how it works towards the issues that have been mentioned around this table today. And the bankability, one thing, technical assistance, skills development, another thing. The third point, public-private partnership, because this is essential, leveraging private capital, but then also to bring all the relevant stakeholders together. This is what we are doing, for instance, in the conference that the Shipping Association has organized together with our funding, to bring all the relevant stakeholders together so that, for instance, we can, as the European Union, we can help mobilize expertise from Europe. Many of our companies are leaders in, for instance, sustainable port management, in logistics, in renewable energy. And we have for today, we have here as well with us the Port of Antwerp, for instance, who has been working on similar projects of modernization of ports in Asia and in Africa. And they will be sharing their views and their expertise in our event tomorrow. So I think these are the kind of elements that the way we work with our partner countries in partnership, be it under budget support or grant funding, the global gateway, leveraging private capital, I think it is really the right way to go. And I'm happy that we have been able to roll it out in this region so well. In Jamaica, very encouraging experiences that I'm now learning myself, because it has been only 2 months that I'm in the country. But yes, indeed, this is one of the main points that I wanted to make. Also, another one concerns the policy dialogues that we always conduct with the government and with the stakeholders, bringing everybody together to bring their views, because We need to work also on the regulatory environment, we need to work on policies, so we need to address the issues that may be blocking, that may be bottlenecks on the way of how investors are able to operate in this country.
Thank you, Ambassador. I mean, I think a lot of what you said, especially around the Global Gateway program, matches much of what Jay said in the beginning of the program, and really there's a lot of synergy among what we've heard from everybody here. So it's great to see how active the EU is, and tomorrow will be a great conference. So very much excited for that. Fatima, Oscar, I want to give you the final comments as we wrap up on our time. On just maybe Fatima, from a World Bank perspective, what will be the role of the World Bank going forward when we among some of the issues and the opportunities you spoke about today here in Jamaica? Then Oscar, from the CAF perspective, get your perspective also.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. So I think that I'm going to refer to something that Oscar said at the beginning. I mean, I think we are here really to respond to the need of Jamaica and the rest of the countries in the Caribbean. I think for us, what it is important, it is in each of the countries respond to the specific needs. Here in Jamaica, for example, where the area where we are currently working more and we see that we are adding greater value, it is supporting the government through our private arm, IFC, on structuring bankable projects and solid projects that can mobilize private sector financing. So, for example, in the context of Jamaica, this is an agenda that we are currently working on. Another agenda that it links a lot with the issue of maintenance and sustainability of investments. It is how to think on, for example, in the road sector, in a much more efficient way to use funds for maintenance. No, and I think for those of us who live here in Jamaica, we see that there are quite a lot of issues in the current network. So how the funds that are invested in the roads can be for maintenance can be used in a much more efficient manner. So this is, for example, another discussions we are engaging in the government. Another important area for us more regionally, it is to support the efforts, that the regional effort to create economic of scales that support the Caribbean, globally. And I mentioned before these two regional energy projects that we have currently in our pipeline. We have also a regional digital transformation program. So I think at the end of the day, we really respond to the specific development needs of each of the countries through our different instruments. Either technical assistance or financing. Maybe an additional elements, we have not gone into detail in this discussion, but this is an area that particularly for us in the Caribbean, it is extremely important. It is a climate finance. So actually, and especially linked to disaster finance. So supporting government, for example, in thinking to structure different kind of instruments that can help them from financing infrastructure more in the longer term toward responding more, for example, in case of disasters. No? So this is also a very important agenda we have currently in the region, and we will continue to support.
Thank you, Fatima. And Oscar, final comments.
Wow. First, let me repeat what Fatima just mentioned, because that's basically what we have to do. What we have to do is be creative, think out of the box, and our role is to facilitate that thought process. How can we come up with new instruments? Your problems in Jamaica, or your challenges, are so unique that we have to develop your response to your regulatory framework, which is maybe totally different from other countries. What we can bring to the table are experiences in which similar situations have actually resulted in good or not so good examples. For example, Uruguay. Uruguay had a very similar problem in terms of trying to channel money from the private sector towards PPP experiences, and in particular social PPPs, schools. And what we did there was to develop with the Uruguayan government a system through which we were able to channel those funds from pension funds towards a PPP system for schools. In Colombia, we did something similar, but for roads. So the issue is here to think outside the box. Our role as international community, at least as CAF, we like to think as we facilitate the creation of new instruments. In the case of El Salvador, we just developed the largest debt-to-swap exchange for nature. $1 billion, $350 million for the conservation of a river. Increase in debt for the country, 0. And we liberated $350 million to actually help the sustainability of one of the main waterways in Central America. So, what is our role? Our role is to help create these instruments. Our role is then to facilitate the financing. And finally, take that experience and help others. Then create their own instruments and their own experiences. And that way we can actually change the vicious cycles into virtual cycles. And I think that's our role.
Thank you, Oscar. And thank you to all of our speakers for a great ending message. The role of the international community is to help. It's very clear based on this conversation, both Minister Hill's comments and the conversation we've had up here, that Jamaica's in good hands. It knows what needs to be done, and the role of the international community is to be supportive. And to finalize and round out this conversation, I'll invite Charlene Aguilera from the Caribbean Initiative to provide some final closing brief remarks.
I'm Charlie Aguilera, a program assistant for Atlantic Council's Caribbean Initiative. I want to extend my sincerest thanks to each of you for joining us today. Thank you to Minister Hill and Jay Singh for today's remarks. And I also wanted to issue a special thank you to the wonderful Patricia Francis. Without her support, today's event would not have been possible. If you get an applause. We're incredibly grateful to all of our panelists for their valuable insights and to our incredible Caribbean lead, Wazi Maula, as well as Maite La Torre and Iveta Krumna, whose hard work and dedication brought this event together. For those of you who have not worked with us before, the Caribbean Initiative is set to platform the voices in the region, not just those in Washington, D.C. We look forward to connecting with each and every one of you, and a recording of today's session will be available in the coming days. And we also wanted to invite you all to an event that we'll be hosting on November 18th in Trinidad and Tobago to continue discussing collaboration and sustainability. Thank you once again, especially to all who replied to my countless emails, and we look forward to seeing you at future events and safe travels. Thank you.